I'm going to quiz you guys to see how well you've been paying attention the past few weeks here at SCL. So I'm going to ask a question first, hand to go up. I'm going to call on you, and I want you to give me the answer. Okay, you guys ready? Pop quiz. Have you guys about 10 more seconds to grab a seat if you want to participate in this. I got some prizes, just to let you know. All right, here we go. Here's the first question. Out of the 4 temperament styles, lion, golden retriever, beaver, and otter, which temperament tends to be accommodating? Miss K. Golden retriever, here you go. Mercy me, CD. All right. Of the 4, which 2 tend to be introverts? Bob. And? All right, here you go. Sanctus Real for you. Last question. Finish this sentence. 5% of what you do. Joanna. Here we go. Casting crowns. All right. Hey, just a quick announcement. On your seat, you should have gotten a little card that asks for your name, email, and then it asks for your top spiritual gifts and also your top temperament styles. If you guys can fill that out for me sometime during the night, and then when you leave, before you leave, we're going to have a little bucket in the back if you can just drop it off. That's just for our reference. It's good to know who we have here, what gifts are represented here, what temperament styles are represented here. It'll be a good resource for us, especially as we're looking for leaders to fill specific roles. It'll be good for us to be able to reference those. So please fill that out, drop it off in the back. And I think Dave has a couple of announcements, then we'll get started with Pastor Gary.
Thanks. Hey everybody, just a few announcements regarding grand opening, and we announced a few of these things this past weekend, but just to kind of reaffirm some of the things. So our grand opening is coming up on June 1st and June 2nd, and there's 3 different service times. So Saturday night on June 1st, it's going to be at 5 p.m. On Sunday morning, June 2nd, we're going to have services at 9 a.m. and at noon. And it is a ticketed event. So if you guys are coming, we encourage you guys just to grab tickets. I have some here. Tonight we'll also have them available this weekend after each service. If you guys have some friends that want to come and you find out during the week, then you need to get some tickets for them. You can always email us at grandopening@southbaycommunitychurch.com. And that we can reserve your tickets and we'll have them ready for you guys to pick up. And just along with that, just a couple areas we need some help in, and we'll have a little pink sheet in the Baywatch this weekend. We really need some help with hospitality. You know, we're doing a lot of food just to celebrate. We're going to have a whole bunch of different food stations, and so we just need some help prepping the food. We need some help serving the food, and that's for all 3 services. So, you know, I think one of the things we always say is, you know, we want you guys to have one service to go to and just to enjoy the service, but we also, if there's one service that maybe you can serve at, and this would be a great way to do it, is just with hospitality. We need a lot of help. Debbie and the team is going to be prepping this food and serving it all before the service and serving the food after the service. If you guys can help out there. And lastly is just donations. You know, a few donations that we could use. We're looking to have a spam musubi station. We're looking at having a mochi station. We're looking at having cookie station. So if there's some things that you guys would like to donate and help out with, we would love any donations for that. And so that'll be on the little pink flyer this weekend on your Baywatch. We hope you guys would take a look for that and check it out. And if you guys have any questions, you know, just let us know at the office. We're always here to help you guys if you have any questions about grand opening. We just hope that, you know, you guys would invite as many friends and family out. We think it's going to be an awesome celebration, and it's a great way to introduce people to the building and hopefully for them to hear just what God's doing through this church and doing all around us. So we hope you guys would invite your friends and family out for that. That's it from my announcement, so let me welcome up Pastor Gary.
Okay, thanks, Dave. I don't need it. Hey, wow. First of all, thank you to Jim Yee. Thank you to Josh and Kathy. They brought pizza. There's pizza galore over there. So if you are getting the munchies even while I'm talking, please get up and grab some pizza. I am so glad you're here tonight. You're going to be glad you're here tonight because I'm going to talk as fast as I can because as soon as we're done, I want to take you over to the building and let you go inside, okay? So it's going to be really cool. So keep your answers real short. If I ask you any questions, no, I'm just kidding. We'll try to get out of here done by 8:30. It might go a little bit later, but then I know Gail's like, oh, I wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning. So, but things are on target for our June 1st and 2nd grand opening this weekend. We gave almost half of the tickets away. Half of the, 1,800 tickets, I think we gave them away, or close to that anyway. So we have a lot more tickets to give away this weekend. Please give them out to as many people as you know. Invite them to come. And actually, we didn't make all of, I think for each service, we printed up only 500 tickets because we're leaving a cushion in there in case people show up without a ticket. We don't want to turn them away. So they'll be able to come to any service. But if you can help us out, push people toward that third service, that third grand opening service. That would be the second one on Sunday at noon on Sunday, because we have more tickets for that one than any others. Probably more people want to go to the first one. If you can push them to Sunday, that would be a great help to us. So they're paving the parking lot. They're polishing the floors. They put in about 80%, I believe, as of late this afternoon. The carpet in the worship center was in, so you're going to be able to chance to see that. When we go there tonight, we're going to have to be very careful about where we walk, and I'll have Carlton kind of guide us. We might have to kind of go single file because of the cement work and all those things. And speaking of which, when Carlton gets here, everyone, I'll say, oh, there's Carlton. Everyone say, happy birthday, Carlton, because today's his birthday, okay? So he's been, which one? Which Carlton or which birthday? I don't know. You can ask him that. I mean, he's getting to the point where it's impolite to ask, like it is for me. It's impolite to ask what your age is, okay? So, hey, let's open up our time in a word of prayer, and then we'll jump into tonight's lesson, okay? Father, thank you so much for your faithfulness, your goodness, your grace, your mercy, your love for us. And I thank you so much for these men and women, young men and young women who are here tonight just to learn more about leadership so that we can make a difference in this world for you. We really long to do something significant with our lives, and leading people to you is the greatest thing we could ever do. Tonight, Father, will you just speak to us about leadership and what it means to be a leader? I pray that your scriptures, as we look into your word tonight, will speak very clearly to each one of us as to what we need to do and what it takes from us to be the men and the women that you want us to be. So, Father, thank you so much for tonight, and we just ask you to bless our time. In Jesus' name, amen. I want to begin by asking you to help me out a little bit. I want to show you some pictures of some leaders. And I want you to, and some are political leaders, so I'm not trying to solicit a political response from you, all right? But what I want to ask you is your opinion on who you think is a good leader and who is a bad leader, all right? Who's a good leader and who's a bad leader? And not necessarily, and don't base it simply on your political views, but on what you know of the particular individual. And some of these are very easy. Some of them might be a little more tricky, all right? But here's an easy one, all right? Let's show the picture. All right, good leader? All right, unanimous, Billy Graham, right? He's one of my heroes. Here's another one, Bashar al-Assad. Anybody know who he is? President of Syria. Good leader, bad leader? Bad leader. Bad. Bad leader. Bad leader, why? Dictator. Do you want the lights on? No, that's okay. The pictures aren't that important. But it has been, there's an estimate out that since the revolution in Syria started, a year and a half ago, he's killed about 80,000 people, of his own people. That's what they're saying. And he's even used his own chemical weapons on them. That's kind of a report. Here's another one, another leader. Not the one on the right, but the one on the left. All right, good leader, bad leader? Bad. Kim Jong-un. What about the guy on the right? Bad leader, good leader? Dennis Rodman. All right. Kim Jong. Okay, bad leader. Here's another one. Maybe a little more difficult. All right. Some of you don't even know who he is. All right. First president to resign his office. Okay, Richard Nixon. All right. Good, bad. Okay. Here's one more. Good, good, bad. All right, not the first president, but the second president to be impeached over a sex scandal. All right, here's one more. All right, I mean, I know some of these will elicit an emotional response, depending on whether you like them or not. All right, good leader, bad leader. Well, he sure makes a lot of money, right? Sure made a lot of money. One more. Emperor Palpatine. Good leader, bad leader. Da 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 da. Okay, bad leader. All right. Now again, you might have heard some of the expressions here tonight, whether someone's good or bad, and your opinion about some of these leaders might be different from what you heard here tonight. Again, based on what your political persuasion is. But here's the thing: in the Bible, God has continually evaluated and judged leaders based on a certain measuring stick. He's done it all the time. All throughout the Scriptures, God has judged and assessed and evaluated leaders based on a particular measuring stick. And his litmus test for whether someone is a good leader or whether somebody is a bad leader has nothing to do with their political views, has nothing to do with how powerful they've become or how much money they have made or how popular they are or how successful they become. It doesn't even have to do with what political party they belong to. All right? So what is that measuring stick that God has used to evaluate leaders in the Bible? What is that measuring stick? Let me just read a whole bunch of those verses that I put there in your outline for you, and you tell me after we're done what that measuring stick is that God uses to evaluate leaders. All right? Starting in 1 Kings 14, verse 8 and 9. It says, I tore the kingdom away from the house of David and gave it to you, but you have not been like my servant David, who kept my commands and followed me with all his heart, doing only what was right in my eyes. You have done more evil. This is God speaking. You have done more evil than all who lived before you. You have made for yourselves other gods, idols made of metal. You have accursed my anger and turned your back on me. All right? This was a reference to Jeroboam, who was the king who succeeded Solomon. So it was Saul, David, Solomon, and then Jeroboam was the next king. That's what God said to Jeroboam. Here's another one. 1 Kings 15, verse 25-26. Nadab, son of Jeroboam, became king of Israel in the second year of Asa, king of Judah, and he reigned over Israel 2 years. And he did evil in the eyes of the Lord, following the ways of his father and committing the same sin his father had caused Israel to commit. All right, so be very careful. Listen, what does it say about God judging leaders? All right, 1 Kings 16:25. But Omri did evil in the eyes of the Lord and sinned more than all those before him. There's another king, Omri. 1 Kings 16, verse 30. Ahab, son of Omri, did more evil in the eyes of the Lord than any of those before him. All right, so God's judging another leader. 1 Kings 13, starting in verse 1, it says, in the 23rd year of Joash, son of Ahaziah, king of Judah, Jehoahaz, son of Jehu, became king of Israel and Samaria, and he reigned 17 years. And he did evil in the eyes of the Lord by following the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, which he had caused Israel to commit, and he did not turn away from them. So the Lord's anger burned against Israel, and for a long time he kept them under the power of Hazael, king of Aram, and Ben-Hadad, his son. All right, one more bad king. 2 Kings 21, verse 16. It says, moreover, Manasseh also shed so much innocent blood that he filled Jerusalem from end to end, besides the sin that he had caused Judah to commit, so that they did evil in the eyes of the Lord. 2 Kings 24, starting in verse 8. Jehoiakim was 18 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 3 years, and he did evil in the eyes of the Lord, just as his father had done. And finally, one last one, 2 Chronicles 12, 13, and 14. King Rehoboam established himself firmly in Jerusalem and continued as king. He was 41 years old when he became king, and he reigned 17 years in Jerusalem, the city the Lord had chosen out of all the tribes of Israel in which to put his name. And his mother's name was Naamah, and she was an Ammonite, and he did evil because he had not set his heart on seeking the Lord. All right, so when you look at all those scriptures, you see that God evaluated leaders on a certain measuring stick, a certain principle. And what was that? What was it?
Sin.
They did evil, sin, idolatry. What else? You say sin, you say evil. That's what the scriptures say. But was it really that? He wasn't seeking the Lord. Okay, elaborate on that. Can we be more specific? What does it say here specifically in 2 Chronicles 12, verse 14? Why did he do evil? Why did they do evil in the first place? They did evil because they did not set their heart. He did not set his heart on seeking the Lord, right? You see, the common denominator in all of these is that, and God assessed leaders, he evaluated leaders, he judged leaders based on their heart. So based on the condition of their heart. In fact, if you look at the first verse that I showed you, 2 Chronicles 12:14, it says Rehoboam did evil because he didn't set his heart on seeking the Lord. That's the last verse. For the first verse, 1 Kings 14:8, it says David followed the Lord with all his heart. Right? So conversely, the good king followed the Lord with all his heart. The bad king, the evil kings, they didn't follow the Lord with all their hearts. So the litmus test of a leader that God used to judge a leader was a man or a woman's heart. It was his or her heart. God evaluated and judged leaders based on their heart. So why is the heart so important? Well, take a look at Proverbs 4:23. It says, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. See, everything that you do comes from your heart. That's what it says. And everything emanates from your heart. Whether good or bad, it all comes from here. And then Luke 6:45, Jesus said, a good man brings good things out of the good stored up in his heart, and an evil man brings evil things out of the evil stored up in his heart. For the mouth speaks what the heart is full of. So in other words, whatever is in the heart is what's going to come out, whether it's good or whether it's bad. And that's what God judges. He judges the heart. He evaluates a leader's heart. Right? If the heart is corrupt, the actions will be corrupt. Think about any leader. Doesn't matter who the leader is. If their heart is corrupt, their actions will be corrupt. If their heart is good, then their actions will be good. All right? So write this one down. Leadership is an affair of the heart. It is an affair of the heart. Author and educator Parker Palmer, whoever he is, said, and I wrote that one down there for you, the power of authentic leadership is found not in external arrangements, but in the human heart. All right? And that's so true. I've been reading a book by a guy named James Kozis and Barry Posner, and they wrote a book called The Truth About Leadership, and here's what they said. They said, quote, there's no integrity and honor without heart. There's no commitment and conviction without heart. There's no hope and faith without heart. There's no trust and support without heart. There's no persistent and courage without heart. Nothing important ever gets done without heart. Purely and simply, exemplary leaders excel at improving performance because they pay great attention to the human heart. So leadership in every sense of the word is an affair of the heart. All right, and think about it. When God went looking for a leader to succeed King Saul, he said, I don't like this guy. I want somebody else to be the king. Who did he look for? He went to the family of Jesse. And Jesse said, he told prophet Samuel, one of Jesse's boys is the next king, is going to be the next king. Jesse had 8 sons. The youngest was David. And so Samuel came to Jesse and he said, okay, bring your sons. And they brought the first son. And he said, oh, he's not the one. The oldest one. Figured that's the automatic, he ought to be the king. Oh, not him. Bring the second son. No, he's not the one either. Bring the third son. No, that was not the one. 4th son, 5th son, 6th son, 7th son. No, that's the one. Don't you have any more sons? Well, I got one son. He's the youngest. He's only a teenager, and he's out tending the sheep. Bring him over here. And as soon as Samuel saw him, he said, he's the one. And what did God say about him in terms of him being the one? 1 Samuel 16, verse 7 says, but the Lord said to Samuel, do not consider his appearance or his height, for I have rejected him. The Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. God looks at the heart. So all these 7 brothers that came before David, I mean, they were older than him. They were probably they were definitely more experienced than him. Maybe they were more educated than him. Maybe they were smarter than him because they'd been around longer. They were more worldly wise because they'd been around. They'd had this experience, but none of them was to be the king. God rejected all of them, but he chose someone who had the right heart. So leadership is all about heart. Leadership is an affair of the heart. So here's the thing. What was so special about David's heart? What was special about David's heart? What was in his heart that made him stand out before God? What was different about him compared to all his other brothers? All right, so here's what I want you to do. I want you to turn and get in groups of 5 or 6 people just right around you, all right? And it's a little easier now. We have a little more room tonight, so that's good. And I'd like for you to explore this question. What does it mean to have a heart for God? All right, because David obviously had a heart for God. What does it mean to have a heart for God? All right, just discuss that real quickly. And then I want you to read Psalm 63. All right, Psalm 63, 1 through 8. It's right there for you. Read that. Maybe you can read it. In fact, if you want, just turn around and read it together. And then... Oh, Carlton, hey, good to see you. Happy birthday, Carlton. So would you all turn around, turn to someone next to you, turn around, and then just ask this question. What does it mean to have a heart for God? All right, what does it mean to have a heart for God? David had a heart for God. What does that mean? Be my guest. What did you guys come up with? By the way, while you're busy in your small group, I went back there and had some of Kelly's chocolate cake and some chocolate chip cookies, and wow, it's so good. Anyways, grab some stuff while you can, and there's a huge birthday cake there for Carlton as well. All right, so what did you guys come up with? All right, what does it mean to have a heart for God based on just your discussions and then based on Psalm 63. By the way, David wrote Psalm 63, so he had he knew what it meant to have a heart for God. So what did you come up with? Anything? Someone seeks him? Good. You can write that one down. That's the first little fill-in right there. Elena, good job. Okay, someone who has a heart for God seeks him. What else? Thirst for him. Okay, you can put that in there. Thirst for him. What else? Obeys. Oh, well, you know what? We'll come back to that one. That's good. Well, you know what? Just go ahead and write that down. Go ahead and write that down. Obeys him. What else? Glorifies him. Praises him. Okay. I had in there one of those thinks about him all the time. Right? Thinks about him all the time. Holds on, clings to him, holds on to him. Shares him, okay? And there'll be more than, you probably will have more than enough, probably come up with more than we have spaces for, but what else? Longs for him, okay? Loves him. I mean, there's a lot you can come up with. Did you come up with one, Chrislyn? What's that? Praise to him, okay, great. And the one about obedience, although it wasn't necessarily right here in Psalm 63, the next verse, Acts 13:22, I think we mentioned this recently. It says here, after removing Saul, he made David their king. God testified concerning him, I have found David, son of Jesse, a man after my own heart. He will do everything I want him to do. Right? He is obedient. He will do whatever God wants him to do. All right, so write this one down. Leaders have a heart for God. It's the first thing. In terms of our heart, leaders have a heart for God. It's an affair. Leadership is an affair of the heart. Leaders have a heart for God. And in my mind, there's no question that this has got to be the most important characteristic of a spiritual leader. I mean, how can you be a spiritual leader if you don't have a heart for God, if you don't love God, if you don't want to connect with God, if you don't hold on to God, if you don't trust God, if you don't pray to God? I mean, can you imagine having a pastor who doesn't have a heart for God? And believe it or not, I've met pastors who you could tell they don't have a heart for God. It's amazing. And same way, spiritual leaders who serve, anybody who serves in the church, you have to have, especially if you can be a leader, you need to have a heart for God. I mean, imagine, and again, there are people who serve for all kinds of reasons. There are people who serve simply because they're just good-hearted people and they just like to help. Or there are people who will serve because their friends are serving. Or the people will serve because they feel like they're obligated to serve. But those aren't all good reasons to serve. We ought to serve because we have a heart for God. So that's the first most important part of leadership, is that you have to have a heart for God. So the question that I have for you is, how's your heart? Do a heart check. Hey, do you really love God? Do you love Him with all your heart? Are you so thankful to Him that He sent His Son to die on a cross for your sins? Are you at this place where you say, I just can't get enough of God. I can't stop talking to God. And nobody's perfect. No one's perfect in this area. And I'm certainly not perfect in this area. But is your heart more inclined to God than it is to anything else in this life? I think those are the things that you want to ask yourself. Do a heart check. Do you have a heart for God? You know, every day, 153,000 people die. Today, by the end of the day, 153,000 people die. 2 people die every second. 107 people die every minute. 6,390 people die every hour. And every year, that comes to 56 million people who die every single year. 56 million people. You know, when we have a big tragedy and 10 people killed in some terrible shooting, we think, oh my gosh, that's so terrible. Or there's an earthquake and we hear, oh, there's this earthquake and 5,000 people were killed in this earthquake in Mexico or something like that. And we think, oh wow, so many people. But think about this. 153,000 people die every single day. And it goes, for the most part, it goes completely unreported. 153,000 people die every day. And most people die without knowing Christ. Think about that for a second. Most of the 153,000 people who will die today will die without knowing Christ, which means they will spend the rest of their eternity in hell, apart from Christ. How does that affect you? You ever think about that? I mean, when was the last time somebody you cared about, died and they didn't know Christ? Did it affect you? Did it bother you? Or did you say, and you went to the funeral and said, oh, that was a really nice funeral, and that's it? How does it affect you? Does it bother you? Does it sadden you? Or do you not even think about it? It's like, everybody dies. Recently, I got reconnected with somebody, I've shared this a little bit, with somebody who was in my youth group 30 years ago. His name is Phil Tanaka. And, when we got reconnected, he contacted me, friended me on Facebook. And when we started sending messages back and forth to one another, I found out that he was pastoring a church in Tokyo. He's actually, when I knew him back when he was in high school, really smart kid. I mean, really smart kid. I mean, he was kind of one of these guys that kind of had all the answers to everything. He was the kid that brought all these other kids to our youth group. And one summer we had 70, 80 kids come to Christ. And Phil was the primary catalyst in that whole thing. And then Phil went off and kind of straight away, went to college straight away, got into the world, got a job working for this very prominent attorney here in Los Angeles, entertainment attorney, got into the whole thing. He decided he was a smart kid, he went to law school and got married and got a job as an attorney for Microsoft. And even to this day, he's an attorney, his home base is in Seattle. He's an attorney for Microsoft. And then God got a hold of him. And God just changed his life. And God transformed him. And God broke his heart. And he told me that the day before the big earthquake in Japan, he just prayed, just cried out to God, shake Japan, that those people would come to know him, because less than 1% of the people in Japan know Jesus Christ, which means that 99.9% of those people are going to go to hell in a handbasket because they don't have a personal relationship with Christ. And then the earthquake happened. And immediately he knew that he couldn't just stay home and sit on his laurels and do nothing. He had to go to Japan. So he packed up his wife and his kids, and he says, we're moving to Japan. And so there he went. He went there 2 years ago and started this church, and God has really been blessing him. And so when we started contacting, just sending messages back and forth on Facebook, he said, let's Skype. And I thought, oh, I don't know how to Skype. So you got to get, you got to catch up with all this stuff. Okay, so I figured it out, and I talked to Greg, and he figured, okay, do this and do this. And so I said, okay, we can Skype. So we figured out the time difference, and he said, okay, let's Skype on Wednesday at 4 o'clock. And Wednesday at 4 o'clock was like 6 a.m. over there, right? The next day or whatever it is. And so we did, and what a joyful reunion on Skype. So I can see him, he can see me. And the first thing he says, oh, let's pray, and so we prayed. And then I saw, just in the first minute that we were talking, I saw he was a completely different person from what I had known of him and what I have known him to become. And when we started talking about Japan, he just started sobbing. I said, so great that you'd go there. I said, Phil, when I saw the pictures of the tsunami and what happened there, I was just so devastated. And he just started sobbing right there, just started crying and crying and crying. And we just paused, and we just prayed. And I thought, when was the last time that my heart broke for people like that? When I saw how broken his heart was, when I saw what his heart was like, I thought, when was the last time my heart broke for people? How about you? When was the last time your heart broke for lost people? This morning for our devotions, we always do devotions, and I hope you're doing your devotions. And if you are, today we're in 2 Chronicles, First Chronicles 22 through 24, I believe, and then 1 Thessalonians 3. And just about everybody on the staff except Dave, we all like something out of 1 Thessalonians chapter 3. And let me just read a few verses to you, and it's written, I wrote them down there for you, but listen to Paul's heart. And that's what grabbed my attention when I read this morning. He wrote, for this reason, when I could bear it no longer, I sent to learn about your faith for fear that somehow the tempter had tempted you and our labor would be in vain. See, Paul went and started this church in Thessalonica, in Turkey. And he hadn't heard from the people where he started this church. And it just was killing him, like, how are they doing? How are they doing? And then verse 6 says, but now that Timothy has come to us from you and has brought us good news of your faith and love, and reported that you always remember us kindly and long to see us as we long to see you. For this reason, brothers, in all our distress and affliction, we've been comforted about you through your faith. For now we live, if you are standing fast in the Lord. And all I could hear when I read this was just, and I thought about tonight, just what I was going to share with you. And I thought, man, what perfect timing to read this morning. And then to read it and to read Paul's heart. He loved these people so much that when he didn't hear from them, it was driving him crazy. He couldn't stand it. And finally he sent Timothy, one of his disciples, you go see how they're doing. And when Timothy came back and says, they're doing great, he says, oh, man, now I can live. Now I can live because I know that they're standing fast. Not only that, he says, in verse 7, he says, in all our distress and affliction, we've been comforted. It doesn't matter what I'm going through now. We're going through all this suffering, but you know what? It's okay because I know you're okay. What a heart. What a heart. And I read that and I thought, how much of a heart do I have? How much of a heart do I have for people? How much of a heart do you have for people? Does it bless you more than anything else to know that somebody you knew a long time ago is still walking with Jesus Christ? And does it break your heart every time you find out that somebody you knew that you went to church with a long time ago, or somebody you were in a small group with even 6 months ago has disappeared and they're no longer going to church? Does that break your heart? Does it sadden you? And does it make you happy when somebody is following Christ? Well, that's kind of what it means to have a heart. And David had a similar kind of heart. Take a look at 1 Samuel 22. David had all kinds of problems. But it says here, David left Gath and escaped to the cave of Adullam. Remember, Saul was trying to kill him. The king was trying to kill him, so he escapes to this cave. And it says, and when his brothers and his father's household heard about it, they went down to him there. And all those who were in distress or in debt or discontented gathered around him. And he became their commander. About 400 men were with him. So David is running for his life because Saul is after him. So he finds this cave and he runs to this cave and he hides in this cave and he says, oh, I'm safe here, I'm safe here. And when all his men heard it, 400 men, it says they were in distress and debt, discontent. In other words, they were all dysfunctional and they were all messed up. It says here, they all just were drawn to him. They all gathered to him and David immediately says, okay, come on, I'll take care of you guys. And he became their commander. I mean, just see his heart oozing out of this particular verse. I mean, even when his own life was threatened, all these men would gather to him and he would just take them under his wing. Okay, you guys stay here with me. We're all safe here together in this cave. I saw it again in 2 Samuel 1, 11, 12. And this is right after he learned that Saul was killed. The king was killed. And the king's son Jonathan, who was his best friend, he was killed. And it says here, and then David and all the men with him took hold of their clothes and tore them. And they mourned and wept and fasted till evening for Saul and his son Jonathan and for the army of the Lord and for the nation of Israel because they had fallen by the sword. So get this. His arch enemy, the guy that was trying to kill him, he himself is killed. Saul is killed. And what does David do? Does he say, yeah, they finally got him. Get rid of him. Good riddance. Woo! Let's party, man. No, he didn't do that at all. It broke his heart. It broke his heart that the king was dead. Saul, even though he was after him, he was his king. And of course, he was mourning for Jonathan as well, but it says that you can read this chapter. It's all about Saul's death and how they mourn. In fact, when the guy came and reported and said, I was the one that killed him, David said, kill this guy. Ordered his execution right then and there because he had a heart even for the king who was after him. When Absalom, his own son, was trying to kill David, David wasn't thinking about himself. I mean, David was like, what a life he had. His own son was trying to kill him. He wrote Psalm 3, and take a look at verse 8. He said, victory comes from you, O Lord. May you bless your people. Wow. Even when his life is just under so much stress, all he could think of is, Lord, bless your people. Lord, bless your people. Bless your people. All he was thinking about was somebody else and not himself. You see, being a man after God's own heart means, of course, it means that we ought to have a heart for God, but it also means one other thing. It means that we ought to have a heart for people. All right, you can write that one down. Leaders have a heart for people. We have a heart for God. It starts there, but we also have a heart for people. So what does a heart for people look like? What does a heart for people look like? All right, will you just turn right to the people around you and say, just discuss that real quick. What does it mean to have a heart for people? All right? What does it mean to have a heart for people? Just turn around. I'm not going to give you any verses. Just discuss that amongst yourself very quickly. All right? What are some ways we show heart for people? By not being judgmental? That's good. All right, what else? Putting them first? Okay, good. Being selfless? What else? What other ways can we show a heart for people? Being forgiving? Great. These are good. You can fill in some of these if you want. These are, I didn't even come up with these, but go ahead. What else? Being understanding. Okay. Loving. Obviously, yeah, that's how we do it. What else? Praying for them? Is that what I heard? I came up with caring for them. I also came up as leaders. This is an important one. Instructing them. We ought to instruct. I mean, and sometimes as leaders, as a spiritual leader, as your pastor, for example, sometimes I'll come across something that I believe is error. It might be being taught by another leader at another church. It might be being taught at another church. And if I hear about something that's being taught that's incorrect, I'll have to go in there and I'll have to correct. So correction is another one. But instructing, teaching the flock is important. Praying, obviously, protecting one another. I mean, if you're as a parent, as Greg's a parent, he's not going to let Evan go off and do whatever he wants to do. He's got to protect his son, right? In the same way, we as leaders, we've got to protect the people in our ministries. If you're a small group leader, you want to protect the people in your small group. You want to instruct them. You want to care for them. You want to pray for them. If they go off, if they go off some way, if they stray away, you got to correct them so that you can bring them back. I mean, these are a lot. There's a lot of responsibility that goes with just having a heart for people, which is why one of our core values here at our church. I want you to get this. One of our core values, in fact, it's our first core value, is that people matter to God. Or people matter to us because they matter to God. All right, people matter to us because they matter to God. Which means that if you're a ministry leader, for example, or you're going to lead a ministry, and you find out that somebody has a concern or an issue, you pay attention to them, you talk to them, you see how they're doing because they matter to God, and they matter because they matter to you because they matter to God, and so we should show that kind of care. Once we get in the new building, I really believe that all kinds of people we've never had under our church will come. All kinds of new people are going to come. And the real test for us as a church is, what are we going to do when all these new people come? Because, here's the thing. The building is great, but the building is not the church. We've said that over and over. The building is great, but what good is the building? What good is our church if all these people come, but people don't feel like they're loved and they're cared for? What happens if they come and because of how they feel we're treating them, they don't want to stay and they don't want to connect with God. They don't want to have a relationship with Him because, these people are so cold. No one even says hello to me. No one even talks to me. They say that if a new person comes to your church and within the first 8 weeks, within the first few months rather, if they don't have 7 relationships, if they've not connected with 7 people, they'll leave your church. Think about that. I mean, if you kept coming to the church and nobody connects with you and you don't connect with anybody, well, you're going to go somewhere else where you can connect. But if I heard that a bunch of people on Saturday night went out to dinner. I think it was Greg and a bunch of you guys went out to dinner, and there was a brand new couple just started coming. Hey, come to dinner with us. And so tonight he came by the office and said, "How can I help?" And he wants to help out with a ministry because he's starting to, just within a matter of a few weeks, is connecting because the folks that went out to dinner on Saturday night said, "Hey, come with us, have dinner with us." So the question is, when we get a new building and all these new people start coming, it's so easy for us to gravitate to the people we know. "Oh, Celeste, hi, how's it going? How's your week? Hey, thanks for that Star Wars shirt. I love that, whatever." And it's like, "Hey, Claire, how's it going, man? How was your week this week? And we're going to get together, right?" And it's like, and you totally forget that there are new people there. Phil, when he left here, went back to Japan last week, and he sent me a message right away, and he says, "Man, Japan's an amazing place." He said, as soon as I got there, he says, "I saw this girl, and he said she was the saddest. She had the saddest face I've ever seen on anybody." And he said, he said the people in Japan are so lonely. They're so lonely, and they're just dying for relationships. He says that's why their church is starting to grow. This church got 90 people in it in 2 years. In Japan, a church of 90 people is a mega church. Average size of a church in Japan is probably about 10 people. And so, God's doing some amazing things there. But here's the thing. How are we going to react if you see somebody walk in for the very first time and nobody's talking to them? Will you go over them and say, hi, how are you? Good. What's your name? Hey, let me introduce you. Bob, let me introduce you over here to Lucky. She's a really neat lady. And hey, meet Albert. Come over here, meet Albert. You know, he's a nice guy, right? And are we going to do that, or are we going to let them just sit in the corner? And then we have no idea what they're going through. And then maybe that afternoon they go off and who knows what they do, right? It's a question of your heart. Do you have a heart for people? And my prayer, I talk about this, Greg, all the time. We want so much for our people and our leaders to have a heart for God and a heart for people, a heart for each other. What are we going to do when we're in the new church and two men come to our church arm in arm? What will you do? See two women come to our church and they're holding hands. And it's obvious they're not mother and sister or mother and daughter. What will you do? Think about that for a second. Because it's going to happen. Because that's the kind of culture we're living in today. What will we do? What do you think? What should we do? But what, right now, just real quick, turn to your group real quick. Say, what would you do? What would you do in a situation like that? Talk. So what would you do? All right? Anybody? Any? Miss Kay? You kick them out, is that what you said? No. No, I'm sorry. What did you say? What did you say, Miss Kay?
I would greet them and welcome them anyway.
Good. Okay. Greet them and welcome them in anyway. Okay. What else? Albert? Be loving to them. All right. What else? Accept them. Okay. Okay. Right. Okay. Okay. Yeah, because they came to church, right? Right. All right. What else? Hey, Greg? If one gets saved, what? Yeah. 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 So that's what we want to pray for, right? So I was waiting for someone to say, we're going to go looking for Pastor Gary. You know, say, hey, there's two guys over there that are holding hands. What are you going to do about them? Get them out of here. You know, and see, that's the natural tendency. That will be our natural tendency for us to go, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. Oh, you know what I mean? When I go to Disneyland, if I go to Disneyland, I don't go very often, but I see that all the time there now. And, you know, it's so easy to say, oh my God, you know, somebody ought to call the park officials and tell them that these two guys are holding hands or whatever it is, right? And it's so much easier in the church for it to happen in the church. But I don't want that to happen in the church. So that's why I'm telling you guys, all right? So that if that happens, you know, the thing is we don't panic about it, right? We love them like they're like anybody else who comes to our church. And then as we love on them and as they hear the messages and hopefully receive Christ, then we can begin to talk to them. And that's my hope, that we can form a relationship with them so that we can talk to them about those kinds of issues and tell them about the kind of church that we are. Because obviously that's not something we approve of. All right, so that's kind of our approach. But the thing is, and tell this to people in your small group, you know, this is going to happen. In fact, this week when you meet with your small group, say, I got a hypothetical question for you. We're in a new church. How are we going to react? How are you going to react if you see this situation occur? And you might get people who will say, well, what do you do? We should tell them they can't be here. And that's the first response. That's the typical response, right? But that's not what we're going to do, all right? And some are going to, maybe judge us and say, what kind of a church is this that you allow that kind of behavior to go on, right? But so we that's why we're communicating this to you right now. We want to talk to them. We want to have a relationship with them, but we don't do it by judging them and then just, you can't be here, you can't do that. All right? Does that make sense? All right, great. Dane.
I just wanted to say that, you know, every single one of us, we're all sinners.
Yep.
We're sinners loving sinners. And
Yep.
if we throw them out, then what makes us any different?
Yep.
We're the same as they are.
Yep.
We have no right to judge.
Yeah, that's right. We are not to judge others. You know, actually, the scriptures are really interesting. We're to judge other believers, but we're not to judge unbelievers. All right, we can judge believers in the sense that, hey, if we find out that somebody is a believer is having an extramarital affair, for instance, we can go to that person and say, you need to stop that. You need to get out of that. And then if you don't get out of that, you can bring it before the church, and then you can cast them out of the assembly. That's what the scriptures say, right? But we're not to judge if somebody's outside of the church and is in an affair. We're not to judge that, right? And then do we want couples who are having affairs to come to our church? Absolutely, so that they can find Jesus Christ and get out of that relationship and go back to the relationships that they should be in. Isn't that correct? So just a little thing there. Just want you to be aware. The bottom line here is we want to be people who have a heart for God and a heart for other people. And so always be sensitive to that. Always be aware of who's coming to the church and who's there and who's not being talked to. I think about all the young people. It's like, oh, every time I go pick up Kylie at North High School and I see all these young people there, it just breaks my heart. You know, all I can think of is, oh, how many of these kids know Jesus Christ? And I hope that you'll have that kind of heart that Phil had, that when you see all these people, and it doesn't have to be Japan, the next thing he's going to do, he's packing up everybody right now in his family, and he's moving to Shanghai because God's put China on his heart too. And then he's going to figure out where he's going, but he's got this idea for how to reach those nations, and at some point I'll tell you about that. But we just want to be people. And leadership is about the affair, is about the affair of our hearts, and so we want to be people who have a heart and a heart for people. You know, one last point, and then we're going to get out of here, get some food, and then we're going to go. But even though David was a man after God's own heart, he blew it big time, right? He blew it big time. He had an affair, and then he tried to cover it up by killing this woman's husband, and he was successful in having him killed. He didn't kill him directly, but he ordered him to be murdered, and he was murdered. He was killed. And when David's sin was exposed, do you remember how he responded?
Said to kill him. Whoever did it, they should die.
Yeah, that's right. And then do you know what? And then when Nathan confronted him, do you remember what he said? And then do you know the aftermath of that? The aftermath of his sin was that he wrote Psalm 51. He wrote Psalm 51. So if you ever read Psalm 51, boy, when you understand the context under which it was written, after this grievous sin that he committed, the words are even more meaningful. Here's what he wrote in Psalm 51. Have mercy on me, O God, according to your unfailing love, according to your great compassion, blot out my transgressions. Wash away all my iniquity and cleanse me from my sin. Again, you know, this isn't just words. This was in the context of what he did. Verse 3, for I know my transgressions and my sin is always before me. Against you only have I sinned and done what is evil in your sight. So you are right in your verdict and justified when you judge. Surely I was sinful at birth, sinful from the time my mother conceived me, yet you desired faithfulness even in the womb. You taught me wisdom in that secret place. Cleanse me with hyssop, and I will be clean. Wash me, and I will be whiter than snow. Let me hear joy and gladness. Let the bones you have crushed rejoice. Hide your face from my sins. Blot out all my iniquity. Create in me a pure heart, O God, and renew a steadfast spirit within me. Do not cast me away from your presence or take your Holy Spirit from me. Restore to me the joy of your salvation and grant me a willing spirit to sustain me. It's beautiful words. And see, the reason why I really believe the reason why God called him a man after my own heart, he even said it in the New Testament. This all happened in the Old Testament, but even in the New Testament, God said in Acts 13:22 that he was a man after my own heart. God continued to call him a man after his own heart, even though he sinned. because he came and he came before God and he asked for mercy and he asked for forgiveness and he asked him to create a clean heart within him. He went back to God. You see, he had a humble heart. You can write that one down. He had a humble heart. He came back to God. He returned to God, and he prayed out and he cried out to God, and God took him back. You know, the heart is an amazing organ in the sense that it's not just for us something that pumps our blood, but it is something from which good and bad flow. Right? Remember what Jeremiah said about our hearts? He said, "Is deceitfully wicked above all else." And in one last verse, I didn't write this in there for you. I thought about this afterwards. Matthew 15:19. You can just write that one down. Matthew 15:19. Jesus said, "For out of the heart come evil thoughts, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false testimony, slander. And these are what defile a person, but eating with unwashed hands does not defile them." So Jesus said it's out of the heart that all of our evil comes. Sexual immorality, greed, lust, theft, false testimony, slander, adultery, you name it, it all comes from here. And yet we're supposed to have a heart after God and a heart for people. So what do we do? How do we get a heart for God? That's the last thing. How do we get a heart for God? How do we get a heart? How do we have a heart for people? Well, first of all, we got to go back to what Proverbs 4 said, right? We need to guard our hearts. You know, as leaders, you need to protect your heart. You need to protect your heart. You need to watch what you put into your heart. You watch what you put into your mind, because your heart can become divided. Your heart can become stained with sin. Your heart can be pulled away. It can be torn away from the God that you love so easily. So we've got to protect. You got to guard your heart. As leaders, you got to guard your heart. You got to protect your heart. Most important thing that you could do with your heart. All right, so again, last thing. How do we, if leadership is an affair of the heart, then it begs the question, how can I have a humble heart? How can I have a heart after God and a heart for people? Would you just turn around and ask that real quick question among each other? How can you have a heart for God and a heart for people? God and a heart for people. How can we have a heart for God and for people? What's that? Pray. Ask Him, right? Ask Him, God, give me a heart after you. Help me to fall more in love with you than ever before. Okay, Greg? Spend time with it. It starts right there, right? Yeah. We must allow God to increase in our lives, right? What else? How do we develop a heart for people? What's that? Forgive people. Okay, good. What else? Yeah, that's a great one. Walk in the Spirit and not in the flesh. Because if you're walking in the flesh, it's so easy to be like if David was walking in the flesh, then he would have said, "Yay, I'm glad he's dead." But how do you say, "Wow, I weep for my enemy"? He was just possessed by God, right? God had just consumed him. What else? Anything else? Those are great suggestions. So here's the last thing I want you to do, and I want you to do this tonight before you go to sleep. If you have time, except Gail, she's got to go to sleep early because she gets up at 3 in the morning. You can do it in the morning. But there's a section in there at the very bottom of that page, your fourth page, is a prayer. And I'd like for you to write out a prayer about what you've learned tonight, all right? And just ask God to give you a heart after Him. Dear God, give me a heart after you. Help me to love you more than I love anybody and anything in this whole wide world. And then also pray that God would give you a heart. Here's the question. And how do you know that you have a heart for God? Because your heart will begin to break for the things that breaks God's heart. That was Phil. It breaks God's heart more than it breaks Phil's heart that those Japanese people don't know Christ. Breaks his heart more than it breaks Phil's heart. And when your heart begins to break for God's heart, when your heart beats for the things that are of God, that's when you know that you have His heart. And that's what we want to be, right? Those are the kind of people we want to see people. We want to see those 156,000 people who die every day, and we want it to just break our hearts that one person would die without knowing Jesus Christ. And if you're not there yet, then you should get on your knees and say, God, break my heart for the things that break your heart. Break me so that I will begin to cry for all those people who are going to hell because they don't know you. So I hope you'll do that, okay? Let's close our time in prayer, and then we're going to, if anybody wants to come, all right, so we'll get out of here in about 10 minutes, give you a chance to grab something to eat real quick. And by the way, this weekend, 2 services here, because we don't have the certificate of occupancy yet. We're not allowed to assemble as a church for a meeting, a gathering inside the building. So we're going to have 2 services here because we didn't have the Holiday Inn. And on Sunday morning, we're going to gather there again at 10 o'clock for a time of prayer. So that and there are no chairs on Sunday morning. That's why we just thought we'd have a service here. And it's not going to be a typical service. So don't invite your friends to this yet, because it's going to be like, we're just going to be prep time because we should be in there next weekend. We better be in there next weekend because that's a week before the grand opening. So, but tonight you get a chance to see it if you can make it with us. And then again, you don't have to stay. You can leave after taking a look at it. And Carlton, would you come up here? And I want you to just give us instructions. But as you're coming up here, let's close our time in prayer. Okay? Father, thank you so much. It is such a joy to be here tonight and to be with my brothers and sisters. And Father, I want so much to be someone whose heart is after you, whose heart breaks for the things that break your heart. And I pray that you would do that in the lives of every single person here. Whether there are people here and they're high schoolers, or whether there are people here and they're in their retirement age, or whether there are people here and they're married and they got little ones running around all over the place. Father, will you break our hearts for the things that break your heart? Like the fact that every single day, 156,000 people die. Every year, 50 million plus people die, and most of them don't know you. And it doesn't even occur to us to be sad over that. Father, will you just do a work in us that we will love you first, and that we will love the people that come to our church, but not only that, the people in the South Bay, the people in Japan, and people in China, the people in Mexico. Will you just do a work in us? Thank you, Father, so much. Thank you for all that you're doing here, and thank you for these blessed people. Father, now we get a chance just to take a peek in our new home. We just thank you so much for that too. Father, for those of us who are going home, for all of us who are going home afterwards, or even now, Father, bless us as we go. Keep us safe until we see each other again this weekend. Thank you, God, for all these things. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, so Carlton, happy birthday. So come over here. Tell us when they're all wanting to know how old you are. I told them you were 39 again. I told them it was impolite to ask, that you're at that age where it's impolite to ask how old you are. But would you tell us, where do you want us to park and where do we meet? Okay?
Okay. Is everyone going?
Yes.
They're repaving the parking lot, so I don't know.